Hello again, YouTube. It's the Atheist Guard. I got a reply on one of my videos. The guy actually became a subscriber, so that's kind of cool. But he said he had 10 more questions for atheists and wanted me to check it out. And that's what I'm going to do right now. I'm going to see what he's got here.
Hey, what's up? I'm DallasWade, and welcome back to another worship service. If you saw my last video, I responded to 10 questions for atheists from an atheist. And after I responded to that video, I watched several other people's answers to the same video, and I was really interested in seeing other people's opinions and answers to these questions, and it really got me thinking of other questions that I wanted to hear other atheists answer. So I decided to compose my own 10 questions and put them in a video, and anyone who's interested can answer them. So without any delay, here are 10 questions for atheists from an atheist. What religion were you once a part of, and what compelled you to first question its validity?
My religion was Christianity, and it was a type of fundamentalist Christianity, specifically called, what do they call that? First Church of the Nazarene. And these people didn't believe in dancing, they didn't believe in drinking or anything fun. And I found it kind of odd that they didn't believe in dancing, because there's literally nothing in the Bible that prohibits that whatsoever. I mean, they didn't even dance in church like you see in some of these churches. And I was comparing it to like gospel churches. At the time I believed, of course. So I was comparing it to like gospel churches, and people were dancing with joy and worshiping God in that fashion. I'm thinking, what's the harm in dancing? Why would they possibly have an issue with that? And that started me on the road of a critical examination of the Bible. I didn't realize where that would lead me eventually, but at the time I looked at it and they didn't have a basis for that. So that really put a nice little seed of skepticism in my brain, even at a very young age, because I knew that the positions they were holding weren't necessarily justified by the Bible. It was someone's interpretation and someone else's idea, some human's idea, to not allow people to dance. So that's kind of odd, but I don't think I've ever actually disclosed that in a video, but that's kind of where it all started, was that one seed of skepticism regarding the specific doctrine that I was under, the specific, what's the word? Anyways, what compelled me to first question its validity was the fact that I was seeing personal interpretations and the vast diversity of them, and that it didn't seem like anybody was honing in on any truth. Like, if something's true, you would expect that over time, especially over thousands of years, humanity would converge on a set of truths about an idea. Instead, we saw more denominations diverging, and everybody had their own little spin on everything. But what really made me question its validity ultimately came down to just learning some science. I hadn't realized I was playing God of the gaps so much, and once I started realizing that a lot of these gaps were filled, and some of the authors actually pushed the whole concept of rational skepticism rather aggressively. I remember reading Carl Sagan's Cosmos, and that really was a turning point for me, because I realized, wait a second, I'm not supposed to just insert a God wherever I can't find an answer. I'm supposed to actually look for evidence no matter where it leads, and if I don't have an answer, I'm not justified in making one up or just believing in an answer that hasn't yet been disproven, because that's backwards. That I'm supposed to find evidence sufficient to justify a belief. So I remained like a pagan or some sort of like a deist for a while, but eventually I started realizing there's really nothing to this claim. There's nothing to the God claim whatsoever. It just doesn't pass if you have a rationally skeptical mind, that you don't accept things just because they're told to you, because there's no actual evidence, no hard evidence for a God at all. And that's pretty much why eventually I adopted the label atheist, because it described me. I don't have a belief in a God.
What finally convinced you that you were an atheist?
I didn't become convinced that I was an atheist. I became convinced that that label applied to me, because I lacked a belief in God.
How have you been treated by your family and others after you became an atheist?
Much like most people's story, my family had major problems with that whole concept that I could be an atheist. They thought of it as a phase, and that I didn't really mean it, and that I was just rejecting God, which in a sense I kind of am. I'm rejecting the claims about gods, that they haven't met their burden of proof. But they saw it as like a personal affront, that they had failed me in some way, that they had failed in, giving me a good foundation. Well, they had. They definitely failed in that regard, because they didn't have any evidence either. And none of them have argued compellingly for their God.
Are you open to religion? And what sort of evidence would one need for you to subscribe to it?
Well, I consider myself sort of a secular Buddhist. I'm open to religions that have a demonstrable benefit, that actually, and only to the extent that the claims they make are true. So, as a secular Buddhist, I don't believe in a God. I don't worship Buddha, or I don't even pray to Buddha. But I like the principles. I like the set of disciplines that they put forth. But I don't have any supernatural beliefs tied to my Buddhism. Beyond that, it's just a matter of like a discipline philosophy to me, more than a religion. I'm open to the concept that a religion could potentially help people, but not that it's necessarily true at its foundation, especially if it invokes the supernatural, the afterlife, or anything like that that's not demonstrably true. So what would I need to subscribe to it? I would need a demonstration that their core foundation is true. So unlike Buddhism, where you have a flexibility in that core foundation, you don't necessarily have to be into the supernatural or anything like that. Most religions have a foundation that relies on the supernatural being accepted, and unless someone can demonstrate the supernatural to me, I really can't buy into any religion. And I have no idea how you would demonstrate the supernatural. It seems to me that the only thing you could demonstrate is manifestations that have some effect here in material reality, in which case you only then would have evidence of the phenomenon. You wouldn't have evidence of the causation, because you can't demonstrate a supernatural cause. Because if you could demonstrate a supernatural cause, it would be natural by definition. It would be something part of that naturalistic chain. So I always say when people ask me that, they usually phrase it differently if it's coming from a theist, that what would you take for you to believe in a God? I always just tell them, look, if there's a God, he knows precisely what it would take to convince me, but I have no idea what could convince me, because I have no idea what supernatural evidence even looks like.
Would you date or marry someone who was religious? Do you have religious friends?
Yes and yes. Doesn't bother me in the slightest. My wife is a pagan, although she's really drifted away from that. Having been married to me for about 15 years at this point, she's a lot more skeptical, because she's kind of understood my arguments. We don't get into huge, heated debates over this subject. It's more of a live and let live thing. I find her beliefs mostly benign, and the supernatural beliefs that she had are waning. They're down to a point where she doesn't really practice it or exercise it in any way whatsoever. And when we met, we were both actually pagans, and I was doing witchcraft and all kinds of crazy stuff, and I eventually started testing my beliefs, and they just didn't map to anything real. They were just, my predictive ability was almost exactly equivalent to chance. I really found no evidence, and that's another reason I eventually left that belief system. And she's pretty much out of it herself. She pretty much doesn't believe in any of that nonsense anymore, although she's more of a deist. She kind of has this belief in a higher power and a higher karmic law, that kind of stuff. And I don't bother her with it, because it never comes up. It just doesn't come up. I have religious friends. My best friend is an Orthodox Christian, and he's one of the best people I've ever known. Absolute pure of heart, will give you the shirt off his back kind of guy. And I don't get into debates with him either, because again, I don't see anything wrong with it. He's largely liberal when it comes to allowing people to have freedoms, as opposed to conservative, where you try to restrict your people's freedoms based on your beliefs. So I don't see that his beliefs are impacting society in a negative way, so I just don't bring it up with him. If he wants to debate me, he can. He knows my position. I've told him. And he respects that. He invited me to his father's funeral recently, And he understands, and he actually brought it up. Says, "I know you're an atheist, but I would want you to be there." And I told him, says, "Dude, I'm honored to be at your father's funeral because that was a great man. I mean, the man. I will honor your father's memory and be there for the service and his service to his country and everything. I mean, everything weighs into it. I can honor people who have passed and miss them, just like anybody else. I just don't happen to believe there's an afterlife or anything like that."
What is your favorite religion or mythology, if you have one, and why?
Only because of the recent Avengers movies. I really like the Norse god kind of stuff. It's really interesting, this whole warrior aspect, and the idea that gods can be imperfect and things of that sort. I like the mythology only from the point of view of a good story, but I don't really have a favorite religion or mythology. It's just kind of like an interpretation of our culture of that Norse mythology, which I realize is not accurate. That seems fun to me. But I don't have a favorite otherwise. If you think Buddhism, maybe, because it's not really a favorite either, because I don't like the idea that people have to believe into something supernatural to abide by the disciplines of Buddhism. It seems entirely extraneous and unnecessary. And even the Dalai Lama has admitted that. He's like, look, you don't have to do all that extra stuff, or you say the prayers and do all the different, memorize all the lines and everything. He says it's not necessary. He says the disciplines themselves speak for themselves. And that's why I follow the disciplines. I don't like the religious aspect of any religion, if that makes any sense.
What gives your life meaning?
Me, I give my life meaning. Existing. My family. I live for the survival of my family, which I think is a completely rational and perfect meaning for any life form, is to perpetuate their lineage. I absolutely love and adore my wife and child, and will do anything to make sure they survive. So right now, my meaning is defined by that process. Now, once my son moves out, or if my wife would die or something, then I'd find a new meaning for my life. Generally, it's always been the pursuit of knowledge. I like learning things. I like understanding things. So the meaning of my life is to delve into deep concepts and learn the deep science and all that stuff. And just be a successful person, because it's beneficial for me to be successful, by definition.
What should the goal of humankind be?
To find equilibrium with the planet and each other. I think that's the best way to put it. To find a way to coexist with everyone and the planet in a net zero or net positive manner. And currently we're in a net negative, although it doesn't seem to hamper procreation in the slightest as population continues to skyrocket on this planet. There's too much hate. I would think that goal of humanity would be to embrace humanism, just the value of each other, and to build societies that ensure the prosperity and freedoms of everybody as uniformly as possible, and to do that in a way that's ecologically sound and responsible, because it's in our best interest to survive.
Do you believe in the paranormal or any sort of mystical realm?
I haven't ruled it out, only to the extent that I think there may be abilities that humans could potentially have that have been sort of poorly investigated so far, and that really comes back to my roots in paganism. There's something innate about the way we can intuit information about each other, and it may be a lot of instinct, a lot of inference, or predictive ability based on pattern recognition. That all plays into it, but there seems to be the potential for there to be something more, that there is some sort of a collective consciousness. And I know that makes a lot of atheists gag to even mention the term, but it just seems that there could be this connection that we have with each other that transcends our normal senses and our normal ways of interaction. But I think that I would still consider that entirely natural. It's just a natural connection that we haven't yet put our finger on, that a lot of social species, I think, would also have. Whether it's bees in a beehive or humans on the planet, there's a community aspect to our collective ambitions. Yeah, I'm starting to get into vagaries. I'm going to leave it at that. I haven't ruled it out, but until I see evidence for an actual paranormal event, something that defies a level of physics, I don't like using that word. Mystical realm, no, I don't see any evidence for a mystical realm either. But as for something that's beyond our current understanding regarding human interaction and sociology, that could be an actual connection between collectives of humans, yeah, that could be something natural and normal that we just haven't found yet. So if you want to roll that under the term paranormal, I'm okay with that, I guess.
If you could recommend one single book to a religious person, what would it be and why?
A single book. Carl Sagan's Cosmos was pretty strong, but A Brief History in Time by Stephen Hawking was profound to my transformation. He raised a lot of deep questions, and he made it really obvious that we can understand these things as laymen. You don't have to necessarily know all the deep math behind it all. That you can understand the questions and where the holes are in our understanding and what's being pursued and what are potential natural hypotheses for things that we don't yet quite know or understand. He goes into the Big Bang origins and things like that and gives some models as to how that could happen. It's really hard. I think Cosmos would be the one I would recommend to most people because it's the most approachable initially, and then right after that I would tell them to read Stephen Hawking's book, and maybe even Universe in a Nutshell, the other Stephen Hawking's book. So Cosmos, Universe in a Nutshell, and then A Brief History in Time. Those would be my three as far as a path to a deeper understanding of the universe and scientific methodology in general. I like this guy. Awesome. Excellent video. I dig him. I'm going to go ahead and subscribe to him right now. Let's see. Boop. There we go. He's got another subscriber and another thumbs up on that. Good questions. Very good questions. And it's one of those things that a lot of new atheists will be asking. A lot of those questions. I'm surprised he didn't ask anything about morality, because that's always a tricky thing for atheists, especially new atheists, to kind of figure out, to hash out this moral system lacking a God. And understand the idea of well-being. Daniel Dennett's work on that's really, really sound and solid for anybody who has those types of questions. Or you can just check out some of my older videos where I talk about morality a lot, especially with these questions for atheists from theists. They bring up morality all the time as the big gotcha that we can't come up with an objective means of defining morality, which is absurd. Well-being, being beneficial to humans by definition, serves as a basis for an objective moral system. You can make objective statements as to what is and what is not beneficial or works towards that goal of ensuring well-being. Avoiding harm versus causing well-being. That's pretty much the dividing line. And using empathy and a lot of other metrics, we can really hash out a solid objective system where it's not just a matter of opinion as to what actions do or do not cause harm or do or do not support well-being. Anyhow, thanks for the questions. Thanks for the video. I'll go ahead and get this thing edited and put up pretty quick. DallasWade is the poster here, published June 21st. So that's pretty recent. Just this year, 2018. 10 questions for atheists / from an atheist. Excellent video. Thanks a lot.